How's it going? This is Corbett Mower Repair. We've got a Husqvarna 435 in for repair today. The issue with this one, it is flooding like crazy. You see how wet it is in there. What happens is the needle in the carburetor fails to seat. It's no longer sealing off the gas, and so it just goes to dumping fuel, and you'll know it because you're cranking it over and it's just spewing fuel out of here. So the fix for that is replace the carburetor and be done with it. So I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. It's not too much to it. You pull these tabs off on the sides, pull your cover off. You got this clip for your air filter. Pull that off. All right, the next thing you want to do, let me get me a flathead. All right, get your flathead screwdriver, and you've got this little setup here. Your throttle shaft runs through that. All right. So what we want to do is take you a flathead, and I've already got mine unclipped, but take you a flathead and just pry that up. And then when you do, you'll notice, you just kind of move that out of the way, but you'll notice, all right, you can take this hand and push that up. What you do is you push that forward, and then, I'm trying to do this one-handed, push down on your handle a little bit like that, and then that'll just move up out of the way. All right. Next, you've got 3 5/32 Allen head bolts there, right there, and then right there. All right, zip those 3 screws out. All right, once you got your 3 screws out, go ahead and pull this fuel line off. All right, and then you've got one under there. Let me see if I can do this with one hand. All right, pull that one off. Okay, now if there is an aggravating part on the carburetor swap of this saw, it's this right here. It's just getting this plastic, the intake housing out of the way. All right, right here you've got a little grommet that sits in. What you want to do is just sort of pry that over and get it out of that tab. All right, and then you have to, this where your primer bulb goes through, you just want to sort of pull it back and over at the same time and get it out of there. So let me do that real quick. All right, so once you've got that popped out, just let it sort of lay over there to the side, and then your carburetor is ready to come out. There's a little tab here that sort of holds it in, and then you've got that fuel line right there. So just pull that fuel line off, and then you're free. Now, since this saw was flooded real bad, this is the time to unflood it. And all you want to do is just, with the carburetor off, you just want to crank on it a few times. And you could hear it. It's kind of wanting to crank a little bit, but do that a few times, and if yours is flooded bad enough, it'll actually crank up and it'll scream for a minute and then cut back off. But that's the best way to unflood these things, because what you don't want to do is put your new carburetor on and it's still in a flooded condition and you don't realize it, and then you think, oh, well, I got a bad carburetor or something else is wrong with it, when all it is that it's flooded. So now we want to kind of inspect these fuel lines. You know, it's funny, this is one of Husqvarna's cheaper saws, but on these cheaper saws, they use the best fuel line out of all of them. Very rarely do you see any issues with these fuel lines. It's good and flexible. Same on this one. It's good, so I'm not going to worry about changing those fuel lines. They don't come with a kit, and so if they're good, there's no point in charging him for them. But over here, this is where they go into the tank. All right, now if yours, get it to focus. If yours is leaking, when you turn it on its side, it's going to be leaking where those lines enter the tank. And so if that's the case, you are going to have to change yours. But I'll inspect that some more and see if I need to change mine. But they're real simple to change. All you want to do is just pull them out from this side. All right, from this side of the saw, pull them out towards you, and that's how you'll change those lines. And just to give you an idea how flooded this thing is, you see how soaking wet that spark plug is. So just take it out and let it dump some of that raw fuel out, and then put your new plug in and then crank on it again. All right, so I've put my new plug in. I still got my carburetor off, so it's getting all the air that it can get. And so just to help make sure 100% that it's not flooded anymore, I'm gonna crank on it some more. So we should be good now to proceed putting the carburetor on. Figure, in case your fuel lines are bad and you need to know how to change them, I'm just gonna go ahead and change the fuel lines on this so you can see how to do it in case you've got to. You wanna start with reach in there and pull this out, jerk your fuel filter off of it, and then you're gonna come back on this side. Now notice these, they come out of the top here, so all you're gonna do is just reach in there and pull them out from there, and then they'll come out from up here. All right, so here's the one on this side here. Let's grab a hold of it. It'll pull out. There's number one. And then you want to get the one on this side. Reach in there, grab it. And it'll pull out just like that. All right, and now we'll reinstall. All right, I'm going to start with this one first. This is the one that's going to go in this side right here, and that hole there on the right. All right, and the easiest way to do it is put this end up through here and let it come up through that hole. So you'll push it up, fish it through that hole, and then you'll take this end and push it into the tank. All right, so you started there, then you came in here and you've got it started in your hole there, and then you're just going to come on this side and finish pushing it all the way through so you can grab a hold of it, pull it out of the tank, put your fuel filter on it, and then let it fall back inside the tank. All right, make sure that when you push that through, that grommet on there, make sure that is seated well, and just to be extra sure, look inside the tank and you see where it's coming through. Make sure that it's all the way through, all the way around, because you don't want it to be leaking. So I'm going to put my fuel filter in it and let it fall back in the tank. All right, on this line, this is just your purge line. Okay, so the only thing that's going to stick inside the tank is this piece right here. Now, something that you have to do on these, I don't know if I can show you on camera, but if you notice, it's going up against a wall inside the tank. And what happens is this is too long right here. All right, and so when you're pushing that primer bubble, because there's not enough gap here, you'll think that there's some kind of blockage in the line, but it's not. It's that this doesn't have enough gap to clear the space. So take you some cutters and just cut this not that far back, but maybe halfway there. You just want to give it some clearance so that when you're pushing that primer, you're not having to push it so hard and put too much pressure on that primer bulb. So it needs to look something like that. So what we're going to do is, just like on the other one, we're going to fish it up through this hole, and then we'll push that into the tank. All right, and when you're done, it should look like that. That's where it is going in the tank. And then once you get it in there, then you just pull that up the rest of the way. So that's how you do the fuel lines. Now we'll do the carburetor. All right, all we need to do now is this throttle linkage here. We need to swap it onto our new one. And then the other thing is, I'm going to just go ahead and replace this line. I don't buy this line by itself because it's just the cost of it for such a small line is just ridiculous. I just use regular fuel line, and I'm going to make it longer than what I need. That way when I put it in the saw, if I need to, because this is not pre-molded, so when I put it in the saw, if I need to manipulate it a little bit, I'll have that extra slack. So I'm going to swap the throttle bar and put me a fuel line on there, and then we'll put it on the saw. All right, you notice on this intake you've got these three tabs here. and that is to help lock that carburetor in place. So just set it in there. All right, and now we're ready to start putting the intake back on. So I'm gonna grab my intake, and you'll just do that in the reverse order that it come off. But of course, before you do that, you need to change this primer bubble. So let me do that real quick. All right, I've got my primer bubble snapped in, but I forgot. Before you mount this in, go ahead and put this fuel line here on that pipe there. So let me pull this back off, put the fuel line, then we'll proceed. All right, I've got it back on there. Make sure, so this is how your choke works. Make sure that this hook is over this bar here, because that's what works your choke. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and put my 3 Allen head screws back in, and then we'll proceed. All right, I got my 3 Allen heads back in, and remember this line here, I told you to leave it long. Here's why. If you get it too short and it's too much in too much of a bind, like if the line's too tight, it will pull off of that primer bubble. But then if you got it too long, I mean, you don't need all that in there. So I'm gonna cut it about right here, and what that's gonna let me do is it's gonna let me have a loop in it where it'll tie in, and there'll be slack in it, but then at the same time, with that amount of slack, it'll prevent it from the line kinking. And that's something that happens often. Someone will change their fuel line and they don't run it right, and then it gets a kink in it, and then don't run because it can't get any fuel. So I'm gonna cut that, hook it up, and I'll let you see what mine looks like. All right, it should look something like that. When you put your air filter on, that'll hold it in place. So now we want to take this line, your purge line, and this goes in that little groove right there, and then goes around and hooks there. All right, so now we're going to hook up our throttle mechanism. All right, all you want to do, the square hole there, I'm sorry, this is hard to do one-handed, but let that fall in place. Bend your handle down just a little bit, and it has to fall. I can't get to it, but there's a little spot in there where that's got to fall, just like that. And you want to take this piece here, right there, and it's going to click into place like so. See that? And that's it. Okay. So I'm going to fuel it up and put my air filter back on, and we'll be good to try it out. Hopefully you can hear me, but you can see how bad flooded that was. Now that it's running, it's pushing all that excess fuel out. So, and do yourself a favor to make it run better and to make it even harder for it to flood. Put you a hole about right there. That's going to let the saw breathe a little better. It'll bypass that spark arrestor screen in there that so easily stops up. Be a little louder, so of course the neighbors will appreciate that, but it'll just make the saw run a whole lot better. I hate to make the video longer, but this is important. On mine, that when I put the carburetor on, I did have to make some adjustments to it. It was idling high. Now, you would think, well, that's the throttle screw, but usually it's not. When it's idling high like that, it usually means it ain't getting enough fuel, and it may be that you have a crankcase leak, but that's okay. And on this one, when I would go to idle it up, it was like it was falling on its face for a second before it would pick on up. And so what I do on that, okay, you've got these two adjustments. All right, the one, always remember, the low or the one closest to the engine is always your low. The one furthest from the engine is always the high. All right, and then you got your throttle screw. So what I do is I turn that up. Now this is with the saw off. Just crank that up maybe 2 full revolutions, and then back this out half a revolution, so a half turn, and then crank it up and see if it ain't running better. What you want to do is turn your throttle screw up some, and then back your low out until it idles it down enough, and make sure it's, it's not stumbling too much. But when you do that, when it gets all the gas that it wants, you'll pull that trigger, and instead of falling on its face, it'll idle up immediately. And that's how it should sound. So that's it. If you got any questions, just leave them in the comments, and I'll get to you as soon as I can. Thank you.